Someone requests for 2 fire trucks, and this is recorded in these records, and they can in the future be analyzed to see if all the proper procedures were followed, everything according to what's expected from civil protection. And these reports that were released after the fire, the big fire in Pedrógão Grande, showed that many things failed. Civil protection didn't work as they should. We also have an emergency system that failed during the emergency, and this is also something that we can blame on the current Prime Minister, because in 2006 he was the Minister of Internal Affairs of José Sócrates' first government, and he created the contract for this emergency system. It's called Ciresp, and this emergency system basically failed during these fires, and the contract that this idiot Antonio Costa made in 2006 as Minister of Internal Affairs basically has a little addendum in the contract that says that in case of emergency, if the emergency system fails, then the company that is taking care of the system's maintenance is not responsible. So the state pays millions and millions of dollars to do the maintenance and make sure that the system works to a certain company, but the contract says that if this emergency system fails in case of emergency, then the company is not to be blamed for anything. This is the type of contracts that you will find in Portugal a lot, and usually you will find that most of them have the hands of socialists in them. Anyway, the report showed all those failures, but nothing happened. The government or the Prime Minister didn't fire anyone, nothing changed in civil protection, everyone was pretty much in the same place. But given the tragedy, it was assumed by our idiot president, which in Portugal basically only has the power to fire the government. Essentially, that's his power. He can't do anything else. But he also doesn't have the interest of doing that, because he is a puppet. He is a complete idiot that basically wants to take selfies with pretty much everyone, including criminals. But I will talk about that in the future. And everyone was expecting that after this tragedy, it cannot repeat itself, right? I mean, lessons should be learned. But you would be mistaken, because we are talking about socialists in the government, supported by far left, including the communists. So obviously it was a big mistake to assume that they would learn their lesson. No, of course they didn't. And in October, it happened again. The government did absolutely nothing to try and amend whatever failed in the first tragedy. And in fact, a report that was released later, after the fire in October, proved that the government actually did something to prevent that resources reached the fire in October. This is how incompetent and how unbelievably idiotic this government is, and especially the socialists are. They are absolute criminals. And so over 60 people died in the fires of October. So in just about 4 months, nearly 120 people died, because there were people injured gravely, and some of them also died eventually. So nearly 120 people died. And when questioned again about the possibility of firing the Minister of Internal Affairs, the Prime Minister said, "No, why would I fire her? No, she's fine." And this obviously triggered an outrage, but not enough, or not really enough to have consequences. The only consequence was the idiot president that said that the government should take a lesson out of this, and said something like, "Oh, the parliament needs to say if they still trust this government," meaning that they would do like a motion to censor the government or not. In Portugal, if you ask for a motion of censorship to the government, it means that if the majority in parliament approves that motion, then the government will fall. But the president knew that that would not happen. Why? Because the socialists, along with the far left, they have the majority in parliament. He knew perfectly well that the government would not fall because of this. So the president did essentially nothing. 120 people, or almost 120 people, died, and the president did absolutely nothing except this, this big speech that basically did nothing, but it seemed like he was outraged with the situation. He was not, because he knew exactly that nothing would come of this. Nothing of that big speech would mean that the government would be made responsible for this tragic situation, this second tragedy in just 4 months. And things actually got worse, because this Minister of Internal Affairs even suggested that she was the victim because she didn't have any vacations, because she was going from one place to the next to try and do something to help during these fires and so on, and she didn't have a vacation. Yes, this happened. And even worse, a Secretary of State for this Minister of Internal Affairs basically said that, people need to understand that perhaps you need to fight the fire. You cannot wait for, proper people, like the fire department. You cannot wait for them. You just need to fight the fire. When we already knew, since the fire in Pedrógão Grande, that many of the people died because they were running, of course, and some of them tried to fight the fire, and they died because of that. So this guy, this idiot, this socialist idiot, once again was trying to suggest that people should fight fire with their own means, which is what they did, and they died doing that. This guy was essentially saying that, you should die, basically. Just die. Fight the fire and die. We don't care, because we're socialists and we can do whatever we want because no one is going to scrutinize us. So the result of these comments finally was that they fired the Minister of Internal Affairs and this Secretary of State, but not because they wanted. It was because the Minister of Internal Affairs asked to be replaced because she couldn't handle the pressure. She wasn't fired because of her incompetence, of her absurd comments claiming that she didn't have vacations. None of that. No. She resigned because she couldn't handle the pressure, because the media was after her when it was a lie. She wasn't pressured at all. And if you would follow the news in Portugal, you would see that basically there were maybe 2-3 questions made to her that she should probably resign, because this is unprecedented. Nearly 120 people died, and absolutely no one is responsible for that. No one in the government, which precisely is responsible for the management of civil protection, absolutely did nothing. They did nothing, and no one expected that they would be responsible for this. They have the job, they get the money for to do supposedly that job, to manage those services, but if something bad happens, then they are not responsible for anything. That's Portugal. That's socialism. So as I said, a new report came out to talk about what happened in this second tragedy, and as I said, it was found that the government actually shifted resources from this fire, or halted the possibility of resources reaching this fire, making the situation worse. But no one was accused of anything, because, and I'll talk about that in another video, the justice system in Portugal is non-existent, and especially when it comes to accusing politicians, it's it's very, very rare, and even more rare is them going to jail. That is almost non-existent. So these tragedies were the worst that we have on record concerning fires. Nothing like this has ever happened. And at the end of the year, the scumbag Antonio Costa, he talked about the state of the country after these horrific tragedies happened, and he said that the year had been delicious because of the fact that the country was, economically speaking, it was growing, and so it was delicious. This guy is the worst. He took power in 2015 not because he won elections. He took power because he wanted to be the prime minister. And since he lost elections and his plan to be the prime minister, which he thought he was a shoo-in because the previous government had applied the financial adjustment program that implied cuts, implied raising taxes and all that. And so this socialist scumbag thought that he had it in the bag. He would be the prime minister without much effort. But that wasn't the case, and he lost the elections, but he had to be prime minister by force. So he made an alliance with the far left, something that no one would expect, because the left and the far left, they are so far apart from each other that no one could expect that. And still, that's what he did, to be the prime minister by force. And the current government, which is that one that took power in 2015, people in the media especially are still claiming that it's a very secure government, very stable government, when it's an absolute lie. It's not stable, because they constantly vote for things that then they come out of the parliament. After they voted favorably to something, they come out of the parliament and say, oh, this is outrageous. We didn't want this. This is not possible to be made into law, or something like that. When just 5 minutes ago, they voted to make that thing into law. This is the state of Portugal. This is the state of this corrupt society that is Portugal. And the tragedies of 2017, and there was another situation in 2017 that was very serious, but not as serious, because there was no loss of life. But these tragedies with the fires in 2017 were, to me at least, the tipping point, because the government was already incompetent ever since they assumed power, or took power in 2015. But it was this situation that showed just how these are not people. These are savages. These are animals that are unfortunately running this country. And the way that they handled the fires was, or the tragedies resulting of the fires, was absolutely appalling. I had never seen something like this. And the fact that absolutely no consequence happened to these people, to these absolute criminals, is something that I simply cannot accept. But it's something that will continue to happen in Portugal due to how corrupt it is. Anyway, I have a lot more to say, but I'll leave it at that for now. If you like this, please, subscribe, and also leave your comment and let me know what you think about this specific situation. If you heard about it, or if you are Portuguese, let me know what you have to say about this. And I'll see you next time.